So I'll just go ahead and get started. I'm Dan Richards. I'm a certified LabVIEW developer. I worked for National Instruments for about 4 years, also at Boston Engineering, where I design devices. And this presentation is about medical devices, so not development tools, not a device used in manufacturing, but actually the device you ship, right? So there's a level of rigor involved with that. And really the meaning of this presentation is about pushing the boundaries of where you find LabVIEW and NI technology. So that's general background. Do feel free to get in touch for consulting or general questions about the topic or other project needs. So the goals of this presentation to, first of all, better equip LabVIEW developers to actually submit designs to the FDA and have them cleared, and to discuss potential challenges you might face, as well as maybe conflicting information, some of the stuff that I found when I was trying to actually get a device made with LabVIEW as opposed to getting those test systems, and help answer frequently asked questions that, for example, on the teaser blurb for the presentation, I put like, is LabVIEW certified for medical device development, or don't I just need to use FPGA, or stuff like that, which we'll see hopefully through this presentation, through this now a new perspective. We'll see those aren't actually appropriate questions. And you might have an idea now of how much work will this take, and do I need to hire a consultant like Boston Engineering, right? So to start off, I'll do a quick regulatory background, then I'll break for questions and clarifications if I missed something or conflated something, so that we're kind of on the same page before we continue. First of all, the biggest point about this, the Code of Federal Regulations is the law. Title 21 is somewhere between foreign relations and national security, so Social Security and foreign relations. So it's the law. If you don't comply, the FDA will find you and kill you. That's not true. And then we have our process, which is our standard operating procedures, project plans, design controls. Design controls, fancy way to say, how do we know our outputs match our inputs? So requirements management, that kind of stuff. Project-specific workflows. And then we have these consensus standards, which the FDA recognizes are. These are the standards that are put together by independent bodies like ISO and IEC. They are recognized as least burdensome, so they're not trying to make your life hell. They're recognized as current good manufacturing process, and also it saves the FDA time. They don't guarantee you're going to get them, however, it's going to help. And then finally, the FDA produces guidance documents like how to use off-the-shelf software. For example, we're talking about LabVIEW, right? So let's keep it going. So what are they looking for? Ultimately, they're looking for safety and efficacy, in that order. They're looking for a replicable and credible process, kind of like a professional engineer. I heard this analogy from an NI developer this week, actually. Kind of like a professional engineer. They're not signing off on every little detail of your design. They're signing off on your process, right? Also, the law doesn't advise the details, right? We're talking about the Code of Federal Regulations. They're not going to talk about LabVIEW or C, right? They're talking about, again, your process. So how do we handle risk? This is a very abstract view, very, very abstract. There's a lot of little details, but here's kind of the stuff that a software person cares about. The FDA classifies the device. There's kind of a big lookup table where you can go find what an intended design might be, like an infusion pump or something like that. Then you do your own risk management based on that, based on your known hazards and harms. So you go through your design and step through it from system level all the way down to software, doing your FMEA in an iterative process. And then you have software process as well, like design reviews, like configuration management, that kind of stuff, which I'll briefly speak to in a little bit. And through the whole thing, because we're good engineers, we have a documentation process, we're producing documentation. So risk management will do that. The consensus standard for that is ISO 14971. For software, IEC 62304, which I'll touch on in a sec. And the question people ask a lot is, well, how much do I send to the FDA? What do they look at? Are they like looking through my LabVIEW code, right? No, first of all, not looking through the code. But how much you give depends on your submission type, first and foremost. If it's a 510K, that means there's a substantially equivalent device already on the market. It saves you a lot of work. If it's a new device, you'll do a PMA or a de novo. Don't worry about that stuff. What we'll care about is the software level of concern. The software people, that's before any mitigations. What is the risk level of the software? And that is the amount of documentation. There's a great guidance document for that. Okay? So IEC 62304, again, a consensus standard. This is also all about software lifecycle processes. So what we're doing, what activities we're doing to ensure good practice, ranges from configuration management all the way to things like maintenance of the product, ongoing maintenance, right? And one of the big things that comes from this is classification of modules. And this is where people start to ask questions, okay, what can I do with LabVIEW code, right? This is where we should start paying attention in this room. We classify our modules, our software modules, as A, B, and C according to our FMEA. Okay, we're doing the risk process, and then according to this, we classify as A, B, and C. A, B, and C just tells us how much stuff we have to do depending on that risk level. It also does something that's very important for the people in this room. It talks about what to do with SOUP, software of unknown provenance. In other words, I acquired it from NI, from an alliance partner. It's not certified for use in an FDA product, but I need to do something with that to make sure that it's okay in my application. And there's a whole lot of information on that, guidance document, that kind of thing. Working according to the standard does not guarantee safety. That's your risk management, right? All it does is guarantee good process. That's kind of a key point I wanted to drive home. And I'll do this quick example. Not going to spend a whole lot of time going through it, but let's just imagine a system we designed and it's got a pump and a pressure feedback. If something goes wrong, we hurt the patient in some ways, right? If some critical function fails, a critical pressure condition, if a non-critical data loss happens, the doctor's pissed, not a big deal. Let's assume we got a Windows target and a single board Rio, which is a PCI FPGA, PCI-based FPGA target, right? And we got some high criticality function running in the FPGA. That's what you'll typically see in a LabVIEW-based application. But there may also be some critical data coming up to the screen, okay? And that's the point that I wanted to bring up. So what I'm going to offer here is a framework, and this is what I did. And I think that if you're designing a medical device, you'll probably end up doing the same thing. And you'll just break things down into modules. This is required per IEC 62304. You'll notice some things right away if you're kind of skilled with LabVIEW. I've got the front panel thread broken out. It's kind of soup to me. I don't know how that works under the hood, right? I just know that it's responsible for certain functions in my application. Same thing with the NIREO instrument driver, the LabVIEW runtime engine operating system. I have all these components broken out. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to describe them in terms of their functionality. I'm not describing, the NI proprietary protocol. And whether I need to know that depends on my risk level. Okay, and that's a question you're going to have to kind of figure out for yourself as you go through it. What do I need to know? We'll get more on that in a minute. For example, user interface, receive data from the GUI manager, display data. That data might be critical. So we take this example and run it through all of our modules and end up with some risk analysis, right? Or some classification of modules based on a risk analysis. And this just tells me for those Class B modules, I'm not talking about Class C in this because I'm going to kind of avoid that if at all possible for the moment. And it just tells me what kind of work I need to do for those modules. Good so far?
Yeah.
Questions? All right. Questions so far? Regulatory? All set? Okay, now the stuff that we care about. All right. As a LabVIEW developer, I want to know if I can use LabVIEW in a medical device, and if it's going to be a problem with the FDA, with my coworkers. How am I going to talk about this? So I'm going to talk about some of the potential challenges you might face if you decide to kind of take on this challenge. Okay, so first and foremost, of course, is perceptions about LabVIEW versus, let's say, a C-based language like, I don't know, Ada or Safety Critical Java or something like Erlang or that kind of thing. There's lots of conflicting information out there. If I use an FPGA, it's hardware, right? I don't have to worry about the software, right? So we'll talk about that. If we use LabVIEW, we'll save time because we're just going to reuse the prototype code, right? Lack of benchmarks for mitigation strategies. I don't know what I need to do to mitigate the potential risks in my code. I've never seen this stuff taught before. There's no resource for me. What do I do? Also, you might find it's just a huge time investment, unknown time investment. You don't have the available talent to work on your project. Let's say you're doing all this management stuff and you don't have a good LabVIEW developer to help you or that kind of thing. You might ask, should I just hire someone like Boston Engineering? Yeah, so, all right, so skepticism about LabVIEW. One thing to put this in perspective is that the FDA clears our, what we do, our process based on current good manufacturing process. Okay, so that's taking a poll of what everybody in the industry is doing. It's not saying what tools are you using, but what's your process. But we have to be aware that that's how they're setting the standard. We're looking at what everybody else is doing. Okay, so let's compare with safety critical programming languages. There are languages like, again, safety critical Java or Erlang or C to the MISR C protocol, right? MISR C coding standard, which I'll mention in a bit. The LabVIEW compiler, which I can't really see under the hood. I don't know how things run. Once I've compiled the code, I don't see the object files. It's a black box to me. Compare that with a TVSUD certified, where I can guarantee that my output matches my input in some cases. Those are very expensive, by the way, but the fact that they're available means that people are using them. Also compare with safety critical coding standards like MISR C. I gave away my punchline. MISR C, which is used by the automotive industry, okay, but maybe one day we'll have a MISR G, okay? Compare with tools for static analysis, formal methods, debugging. There are tools out there that do a lot more in terms of static analysis than what we have with the BI Analyzer toolkit, and I'll touch base on what the FDA thinks about that. And then I'll get into some, so then there's formal methods. So formal methods are mathematical proofs that some variable in your code won't go above a certain level, or if you divide by 0, that kind of stuff. And debugging tools. If I need to know what happened to my code, I can step through it line by line and see exactly what's happening in processor memory in some cases, but that's not something I can do with LabVIEW. There are other things I can do, right? I got other tools which I don't think I mentioned it, but yeah, like execution trace toolkit is kind of cool for that. There are other third-party tools you can use to monitor what's going on, but that's not what this covers, so let's keep going. Okay, and now story time. How did I, in this position a year and a half ago, get past my own skepticism when, it was put on me to decide or come up with an argument to my employer, like what do I think we should do? And I had, some people who didn't really believe in LabVIEW. They don't really know what LabVIEW is, right? It's kind of like they see it as, it's not really a compiler, it's an interpreter, right? People say things like that. Okay, it's not software. Okay, so I heard it all. The background of this project, it was a robotic medical device that had some motion, had a consumable RFID chip. It was prototyped already with NIWeek and LabVIEW. Hence why they showed up at our door saying, hey, can you just do this in LabVIEW and take the code that we have, right? And we had to deploy, we were doing the software only portion of the code, so we were doing it under our quality management process, deploying it to their system. We had only recently been certified ISO 13485, which is the medical device quality management system standard. That's nothing to do with software. So, suffice to say, our process was definitely evolving, nowhere near where it needed to be. So what was the result? Well, I tried my best to build a case. I read every document I could, everything I could find, and like a week after I found out about the job, I got in the Martian. I said, we're doing this in LabVIEW, and they, like idiots, they believed me. And so then 6 months later, we were putting our submission together for the FDA. You got to wait about 3 months for them to get back to you. So you got this big stack of paper, right? And you ship it off to the FDA. And about 3 months later, we get this. And this is when the probably greatest feeling of adrenaline, to get a response like this, that they're basically calling my bluff, saying it's not clear whether you have adequately tested for runtime errors such as buffer overruns, null pointer dereferences, resource and memory leaks, dangerous casts, all the stuff I can't test for with BI Analyzer, right? So I knew other people had to cheat this, right? So you guys familiar with Optimatica? Optimatica, they presented it in NIWeek in 2007 as well as 2015. They have a highly invasive treatment of cataracts, glaucoma, where they actually burn the retina, right, in a pattern that's generated by a laser coming off of the R-series card. Cataract treatment, which effectively liquefies the cornea, the whole cornea, right, so they can replace it with a fake cornea. That's pretty invasive, so I'm thinking, okay, I think we could do something here, right? Sonaris, they had the one that basically goes in, probes the tumor, freezes it, it kills it, the body digests it, they go from there, right? HEPA wash, they were TUV SUV cleared. That was a liver dialysis or blood cleansing prototype. which if something would have gone wrong would kill the patient. So I'm like, okay, how did they do this? And they were actually cleared with Class C software, right? So I'm telling myself, I know these things are possible, right? Well, another way to think about LabVIEW skepticism, we've all heard this bit about like LabVIEW increasing productivity by offering abstraction, right? We're no stranger to that. Abstraction, of course, or productivity, then therefore, abstraction while increasing productivity will reduce control. And the question that I was sort of posing myself early on is, well, what about risk? What does that do to risk? Is it something like this? But I also know that if I'm programming everything myself, the more lines of code I write, I'm injecting more and more bugs. So does it mean it's like this? I don't think so. I don't think that's the case I'm making. You know, and just so we're clear about what this is, I should have done this, but way on the left-hand side, that's things like assembly or HDL, and then maybe stepping up from there, C, C++, maybe C#, LabVIEW, and then maybe way over on the right, you have something like model-based design, where you're literally like generating C code from a model, and you don't even touch the code, and it just runs, right? Stuff like that. I know that some of that model-based design code is running airbags. So if they're running something as safety critical as an airbag, surely there's a place for LabVIEW in here. Surely there's a place, right? And what I'd like to offer the notion of, and the resolution of this, is that risk management is holistic. It's about how your user's going to use the product. It's about your design risks. Maybe you want to go mitigate those risks with hardware. In fact, this is what everyone does. This is why FPGA is so powerful, because we're taking advantage of a more hardware-based solution. But again, we got to have a qualifier of that, which I'll get to. Okay, and process risks. Where else could I inject risk in the code? And where could this be used later to cause a problem? Any questions so far? All right, so FPGA, we all know that, I mean, I actually saw something from 2014 or 2015 from someone from NI saying, well, the good news about FPGA is that it's hardware, so therefore you don't have to treat it as software when you go in your medical devices. And that's, relatively speaking, it's true because it keeps happening that way. And the FDA keeps saying that's okay. But there's some stuff we have to be aware of. IEC 62304 is again, it's the consensus standard. And in the new 2015 amendment, they have suggested that FPGA, CPLD, any code written for these devices must be verified, must go through the rigors of basically your process, whatever your process may be. So for 62304, we have to go in and check that code. And it could be Class C code. So now we got Class C code running in LabVIEW, right? What do we do? What I want to offer is it's just the same process we did before. Describe the functions, come up with our classifications, and then you do your documentation and analysis based on that. Okay, so at a high level, this makes sense to me. This is guidance I would take. I still don't know yet what I would do with Class C code, but I'm closer to something, right? Okay. We've all heard about this. Here's another potential challenge, and I had this challenge. We've all heard design, prototype, deploy. You're getting a certain level of value out of the NI toolchain, right? And we got this product. We got this product as a prototype, and it had already gone through offshore clinical trials. So to them, their product was made, right? But it was made outside of design controls. So there was a little bit of pressure to just take the code as it was, and I needed to come up with an argument about why that was a problem, because I wanted to achieve the value of this, but I want to do it within the law, and you can too. So the thing that I want to, I guess I should go up a point and mention, is that if you're designing something that is going to be used in a medical device and you don't use design controls, you're literally breaking the law. That's literally what that means. And that was pretty clear to me, and I had to find a way to communicate that. One way to think about it is that your design controls are not the same thing as your development model. You can still have design controls while you're going through that early stage design process. And most quality gurus I've talked to have recommended this approach, that you start quick going through your design controls from the beginning. And then the last point I'll come up with, but don't hold me responsible for this one, okay? So The last point I'll come up with is that maybe, just maybe, there's a case for treating that old code as soup. The problem is, how do you come up with, say, like an independent review of the code? Aren't you going to be a little bit biased? You know, I kind of call BS to that. That really, I mean, I don't want any old artifacts from the previous design. I want to start from my requirements and go through design controls for any outputs I'm producing. Okay, that's my interpretation of that. So another challenge is lack of benchmarks, and this is the most interesting place that I see for development with National Instruments. Lots of work needs to be done on the NI side. Lots of work needs to be done with partners and people like myself and others I've met here at NIWeek that can push the ball forward in this way. And I'll talk about one in particular that was really impressive to me. So things like tool validation. How do I know I validated LabVIEW for use in my product? I have to validate all my tools. That means Windows. I have to, weirdly enough, I have to validate Windows. If I'm using Excel for something, I have to validate Excel. My source code control, I have to go through the whole thing and validate all those tools, right? How do I know it's enough? Risk analysis, did I do that appropriately? Do I need more detail? Static analysis, how do I know that my code is going to do what I said it would do without errors, like the kind of errors that the FDA called me on? Verification testing, and then coming up with suggested mitigations. I will share that I have this document that I put together, and if you're curious, just shoot me an email. I got cards up here. It's got a list of mitigations. These are helpful regardless of what kind of system you're designing, and they will. Hopefully, you know, what I should say is that, yes, they're helpful, but really it depends on the system how you should mitigate a particular risk. And a critical risk, again, should always be mitigated in hardware. And it's, oh, by the way, this list is extremely incomplete. Oh, and this next point, you know, can LabVIEW code be guaranteed? Can I guarantee the code I'm producing can be run? Again, great conversation this week with an NI R&D engineer. In the best cases, guaranteeing code is extremely difficult. In the worst case, it's impossible. I agree with that wholeheartedly. It's you know, it's not about that. I think going forward, we will always treat software as kind of just a little bit nebulous and something we should de-risk with hardware. Fortunately, there's some cool stuff going on. NI's producing SIL modules, so that will be great. Those are going to be available at some point in the near future, where we can take advantage of. I think they refer to them as zombie modules, where like they just keep running even if they're not even plugged into the compact Rio. They have their own stuff in them. That's kind of cool. Okay, and then a question I would have is, well, we have MISRA G, well, MISRA C, what about MISRA G? And in fact, I learned on Monday from Professor Marcus Heidt, who's a professor out in Germany and is now leading the CAS, which is the Center for High Assurance System Development. Don't worry about that, but basically he's trying to get LabVIEW in safety critical applications. And he gave me permission to share this, and I've got some, if this is really something you're interested in, I've got some flyers, and he wants to hear from people who are motivated to make this happen. Yeah, and so I'll kind of go from there. He did a really cool thing where he audited, and this is very rough. This is not accurate. This is a first pass. He audited the MISRA G standard. In the red, you've got rules not relevant to LabVIEW, so that's kind of a scary area. I want to figure out how to bridge the gap. Yellow, rules which have to be included in LabVIEW coding guidelines and are not yet. And the green is the stuff that's already in VI Analyzer, stuff we can do already. Cool. So to summarize, I think the bar's pretty high, but ultimately keep in mind that the goal of the FDA is to protect the customer. So we're doing good manufacturing process, right? Good engineering. Risk management is holistic. That's a key point. It's about your design. It's about your user. Blah blah blah. You shouldn't reuse artifacts in research. I recommend treating FPGA as software. It will lend credibility to using LabVIEW and medical devices if you're a good engineer about it. And finally, get a good quality director or hire a consultant like Boston Engineering. And that's it. I'll open up for Q&A, and I'll also leave this up. This has some links, and if you're also interested, I'll send you a PDF of the slides. This one might already be in the thing, so. Oh, there you go. So does anybody have questions? Yeah.
if you have usually to create a control system for multiple classes, you need hardware redundancy.
Sorry,
And,
hardware?
Yeah, and I think that the so is that NI instrumentation has these products, for example, inside the combat rail. I saw that you usually have the PCI with the FPGA and the PC. How could you solve this problem, for example, using a compact rail with the C product? I wanted to...
Oh, with the same product, so now you'd have the RT?
Yeah.
Right, so the software person just cares about, well, now I've got this additional target, and I have to add those modules and assess that risk. You know what I mean? So you'd have on the left-hand side of that risk assessment where you had the modules broken down, you do that for RT as well. So just kind of go through that process again. Sure. Yeah.
So you kind of saw the case of Fable and Flat when you came from National Instruments. Did you have a lot of resistance in trying to get your colleagues to play off on LabVIEW versus CD?
Yeah. So I had, let's see, I've actually got some, let's see here. I had to cut a lot of material, but this is kind of interesting. I mapped out the team at one point. We had a director of med tech who just laughed at the idea of using LabVIEW. This is the guy like in charge of the dealing with the customers, right? He was totally not on board. But then again, he was sort of let's say not keeping up with new technology at this point. Our quality director was pretty. He didn't really care. The customer, all they cared about was getting to market fast and making money, right? Well, they cared a little bit about safety. The software consultant that we actually hired who brought in a software test team, she was a pro in IEC 62304. So I had a resource that I should not take for granted. She was a pro. She built medical devices with C, things like pacemakers that require 100% uptime and a whole lot of testing every time you breathe on them. So and she was fine. She didn't care. But she was really a critic when we started going into the process, and I had somebody who was pretty sharp to bounce ideas off of and kind of challenge my thinking. But ultimately, I think it was that first person. Another person I didn't include is our VP of engineering, who kind of always talked about a perception like LabVIEW is just kind of a tool we use. It's not really something we're going to use for medical device development, product development. He's seeing it as this kind of thing like, look, the sweet spot is test and measurement. Right, and I'm thinking from my NI days, the sweet spot really is that platform, that platform compatibility, where I can take that design prototype deploy approach where it might actually pay off. So I was excited to get the payoff for the customer because they'd already been in LabVIEW, but I was the only person who thought that. So what I had to do and really where I came from was. I parsed the Code of Federal Regulations to the best of my ability. I parsed every one of those guidance documents. And then when we went into meetings, I think it became clear that I was more prepared. And that was probably when things started to shift. So, yeah.
So how did you address those concerns that the FDA first responded to?
Oh. So you're talking about this one, right?
Yes.
So we had a really solid risk analysis, and the thing to keep in mind about the assessment of software, the class A, B, and C, those are the rankings before mitigations. In fact, one of the things that is pretty common standard procedure is when you're ranking your potential hazards in your system, that you never say that you can de-risk a hazard with software. You know what I mean? Maybe you can detect it better or something, but you always assume the highest level of occurrence, that it's going to happen. And then from there, you get this really nice, shootout of all those rankings, right, the A, B, and C. So we've done a really thorough risk assessment, and I felt confident that we covered everything. And that's what I said, like, look, if this fails, we know exactly what's going to happen. So while we have, some of these Class B modules, we know that these are going to happen. And by the way, we did unit testing and we added white box testing, which is like adding instrumentation so that you can make bits flip where they shouldn't and check to see if you catch heartbeat errors and critical data failures and stuff like that. So, I mean, it was a pretty beefy software design that had a lot of risk mitigations in it. Explicitly targeted at the things we could not test. And there were proven mitigations.
And out of curiosity, does it also take another 3 months?
Yes. Yeah, in this case, it was like 4 or 5. And we didn't hear from our customer for a while because they're pretty busy. So we went and looked on the FDA website, and sure enough, there it was listed. And that was a pretty exciting moment for me anyway. That was pretty exciting. Debate?
Do you have any feedback from people, your quality person, other people in your company, how well it's all went using LabVIEW versus other cases where they use C, or is it, do you not have a head-to-head comparison, so to say?
I don't.
And this is all pretty new, right? So you don't have years and years of...
No. And again, I'm 4 years doing development. I had a little bit of experience with technical support, working in NI. I had a deep understanding of the tool chain. Taught LabVIEW, and I've always been sort of an advocate of good programming practices. So some of this stuff was kind of in line with my personality, honestly.
But you see LabVIEw now as being a good tool going forward for medical industry. You think this will just be used more and more? Is that fair to say? Or
I think a lot of people are. And another point that I probably didn't bring up is other people have done this. A lot of people that did not come back and talk at NIWeek because they're on the next job. In fact, when I started telling people, hey, I'm doing this talk, I found out about a guy who's done this like 10 or 12 times. So, it's pretty dark. There's just not a lot of information about it. There's not a lot of support, and the people in NI that used to be supporting this topic have all left. They're all no longer in NI. I don't know what's going on with that, but there's like this big gap. And I'd love to see more investment in the area, but it's not priority. The people that are involved are aware of it. It's just not really priority right now. But it ultimately goes back to good design, I think. All right, I'll stick around for questions. And again, I have these flyers from the CAES. This is the work that Professor Haight's doing. But thanks very much.